want me to go?
I think it's your job to review the agenda.
Oh, okay, very good. Well, thank you all for joining us on the final day of the conference. This is a testament to your dedication to our field. So, a couple of things we'd like to share with you this morning on our repository project that I hope you'll be impressed with. We'll talk a little bit about how we got to this place, which is a very interesting story. And if you were at our presentation yesterday, you learned a little bit more about how SUNY and its fact council have really ratcheted up the strategic planning initiatives, and this is one of the deliverables from that. We would like to spend a little bit of time talking with you about our partnership with ArtStore that has helped this project come to fruition, at least so far. And then Brad's going to talk a little bit about how we developed the prototype and show us a demo of the prototype. And then we actually need some very substantial input from all of you about future directions for this project. We think it's kind of ready to be kicked out of the nest and see if it flies. And this might be a good opportunity for you all to provide us with some feedback to some very specific questions that we have about how we might move that forward. So off we go.
I feel like a little bit of an interloper here this morning because all of the heavy lifting has really been done by the gentleman on either side of me, but I wanted to provide some context. As Joe mentioned from yesterday, the Faculty Advisory Council on Teaching and Technology launched a series of task groups, and this was one of the inaugural task groups where our provost had really said he wants to learn more about how to make best use of space and how can we make space more flexible, how can we update space. And one of the early wins was that we were able to form a partnership with the SUNY Construction Fund, the people that are responsible for a lot of the design and construction across all 64 campuses. So we met, invited some people together, and then recruited a few more. We put together a charge. A task group charge, of course, has a very defined start, a defined finish, and we wanted to have very clear deliverables. And when the entire process began, it was really just about an environmental survey of what types of tools were out there. We felt a need to find out what was going on other campuses, how were they using space, how were they making that space flexible, what were the costs involved in innovating that space, and how were campuses meeting a variety of teaching and learning needs with their classrooms and classroom technology. So overall, the idea was how can we collect all that information, get it into one space, and get it to a place where it can be easily shared. Initially, we were thinking just within SUNY, except within SUNY, we all kind of know what each other's spaces look like. So the more we talked with people, we thought, gosh, there really is some need to do this on a national level. And then we started looking into there really wasn't a good solution out there for collecting, gathering information, and providing a forum for people to talk with each other. There were lots of different solutions that had pieces and elements of that, but there was no one big repository that could be considered very reliable and a place where everybody could easily get the information both out and in. So the idea was to take care of that charge for our provost, see what we could come up with, initially look at what was out there, and then begin to use that information with a vision to communicate best practices back to not just SUNY campuses, but to have a broader discussion on a national scale.
So as the Learning Environments Task Group really began to dig into this charge from the SUNY provost, we spent, as Lisa mentioned, we spent a lot of time looking at what were the resources out there already. And we found a lot of really good resources, but they were mostly static resources. So we found a lot of colleges and universities had some very nice websites that documented their classroom design strategy, had samples of their designs, and talked about their success or lack of success in some cases. Groups like EDUCAUSE had published a number of special issues of their quarterly publications. They had also produced a couple of monographs that had a couple of dozen really high-end designs for a variety of kinds of spaces. We looked at resources from Australia and from the UK, and again, there were some really fine collections, but they were kind of finite, and at the most they had possibly a couple of dozen design samples, and they really were static. They weren't searchable by any stretch of the imagination, and we thought, that may be really the key to taking this kind of work to the next level, is coming up with a searchable repository that people could go in and say, well, we're getting ready to build this science facility, and we really think we need to see some examples of science labs with multiple displays that seat this many people and work for both biology and chemistry. Wouldn't that be ideal? And so we began to develop this concept of a searchable repository that we could that would certainly benefit SUNY, but could also potentially, as Lisa mentioned, be a national resource. So we started this process by we weren't exactly sure how we could deploy it. We started developing a metadata schema and a record format, and saying, well, ultimately, this is what we'd like to be able to do with this. Let's see, let's come up with some functional and technical specifications for it, and then we'll look for, see if we can find a platform.
What Joe is really saying is we figured out we needed to talk with librarians.
Exactly. Yeah, we did, in fact. They were part of our task group. So we kind of by accident stumbled across a new product that a company that many of you may be familiar with, ArtStore, has been putting together. So for those of you who are not familiar with ArtStore, they're a New York-based nonprofit corporation. They have been around for quite a number of years. Their primary product right now is a very, very large-scale art image database that is kind of becoming the replacement, or has become the replacement, for what used to be the slide archive in a lot of art departments. It's a subscription-based database that you could use to collect all kinds of art images for art history or any number of kinds of things. ArtStore for years had gotten a lot of requests from their customers to say, well, your database is really great, but I want to be able to add my own content to your database. And although you could do that with ArtStore, it was really kind of a cumbersome and drawn-out process. You couldn't do it yourself. There was no self-service interface to ArtStore. And they had gotten this request for a lot of years, and so they finally decided they were going to build this self-service interface. And they've created a product called Shared Shelf, which is really still in beta right now, but it's a nice product, and it really was built to address the need for faculty and librarians and researchers to be able to augment the large collection of images that ArtStore maintains with a local database of images that people may create themselves. So we took a look at that and we said, that might just be the great, perfect platform for this repository that we've been thinking about. And they said, well, it's funny that you would mention that, because we're doing a project with the Society of Architectural Historians, and they want to do something very similar to what you guys have just talked about with instructional space, and let us show you that demo. And so we began having some ongoing conversations with them about using this shared shelf product in almost a standalone, well, not almost, an entirely standalone way that they had not envisioned. And they got very, very excited and said, we think we really want to work with you on building this prototype, because this could open up a whole new application for this product that we had never thought of before. So they agreed to come on board with SUNY Fact and put together a prototype for an instructional space repository. And we began building that in the spring of this year and came up with, version 1, or well, not really 1, but almost 1. A prototype version was available in May of 2012. So it's in pretty good shape. It's still got some things that as we've tried it out with people and demoed it for folks, we've had people say, well, what if you added this, or what if you added that, or maybe the date that room was built would be helpful. Things of that sort that we didn't think of in the initial design. So Brad is going to actually show you the prototype.
I was brought in about halfway through the process to round the troops. We created a subgroup with the different players, librarians, instructional technologists, and also people from facilities. There was quite a bit of excitement from facilities because these new designs are actually foreign to them. They've been working on a model, at least in our state, of from the 60s and 70s. So there's two components to ArtStore. There's the shared shelf, which I view as the where you develop the content, and then there's ArtStore, where you can actually go and view it. It's more of the public face. So with the shared shelf, you log in, you have access to the database, and during our development, basically it's a database that happens to have an image for an asset. After talking with the different constituents, we decided on basically 3 general areas: a pedagogical section, where what kind of teaching, what were the class sizes, what were all the other needs of the faculty; a facilities section, basically, and some of these fields overlap the different areas, but we wanted to make sure we covered all the bases. Facilities, how many square feet, what kind of lighting, what's the flooring, what's the furniture, and then finally, near and dear to my heart are the technical aspects. What are the nuts and the bolts of the IT and AV components of the space? So between all those different areas, we think we have a pretty good handle on what data we wanted to at least be able to show. When you're entering the field, or when you're entering the data, you may not have all the information, and it's, we think that's fine. Like a lot of times we'll go and do a renovation, I have no idea how much the facilities costs are for the room. If it's a new build, new construction, I may have that information. So anyway, I'll show you, just walk you through. Basically, you log in, you upload. It's much like a YouTube interface. You browse, just find an image on your computer or drive, and it just uploads. Then you go in and you have to enter all the data. A lot of the fields we tried to pre-populate with different drop-down boxes for the particular field.
Are you going to pre-populate that one?
This is a shot of just a picture it took out there. Generally, what we talked about earlier at the other presentation, probably the most important field that gets filled in is the contact information, and secondly is probably a brief description, maybe with some keywords that you think, like smartboard or collaborative or anything that you think is important. So you can, I won't bore you with all the different fields, but basically there's campus, building name, number. The first section is contact information between technologists, facilities, and academic. Room number, room type, room category. There's different, we kind of decided on the different pre-populated data points for each field, if it's a lab, a dry science lab, and so on and so forth. So it's a lot of fields. And I'll show you one that's pre-populated. Maybe it'll make more sense because there are quite a few fields. Yes?
Are there any fields where you have to submit
I don't know that we had any required fields. I think we talked
haven't,
about that.
We haven't set any up yet, but they can be set up.
Right. So I'll just save this. I don't want to bore you filling out the whole database.
We have to remember to parrot questions, too.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. The question was, were there any required fields? And we're working on that. or it can be, but we just don't have any currently. Now, once you enter the record into shared shelf, it's not necessarily published. You have to actually go through and select it and publish it. And it's just you can highlight multiple ones, I believe. And you just select them and publish them if you want. You can also go back in and unpublish them if you choose. It does take a few moments for it to move from shared shelf into the published art store website, maybe 10-15 minutes. So, I mean, Jim was nice enough to enter some data for a particular space. And actually the data looks a little more elegant in the other view, in the art store view. So that's basically how you upload the records into the shared shelf. Are there any questions?
Is there a way to upload more than one picture per record?
There's a technique they use, you have to enter the first one manually, at least this way. You can take it and set the first one where you enter all the data, and it's going to be duplicate for another image, and you set that as a master, and then you can paste from master and it duplicates all the records.
One of the things that Art Store has on their roadmap for this product, and this is why I think it's still kind of in a beta mode, is that there would be multiple images or documents per record. So for instance, you might have a still image, you might have PDFs of the floor plan, the furniture plan, schematic drawings for the media system. You might have a panoramic video, any number of things. They're not quite there yet with the product, but that's on their roadmap, so that a single record could have multiple media types and multiple image types, multiple images.
But right now, you have more than one image.
No, right now each one's a separate record. You can duplicate the information, so when you do a search on it, and that's what we'll get to, it comes up, but they are unique individual records. It basically cut and pastes all the fields, all the information in the fields for a similar image. But yes, it would be nice if you found, hey, this is what I'm looking for, because in theory they could be scattered.
Yeah, that's part of their roadmap, but it's not quite there yet.
Yep. Any other questions on shared shelf? I mean, it's kind of not
Pretty
terribly exciting.
straightforward, yeah.
I mean, the real power, yes.
Can you create folders so if you wanted to designate different buildings and have all the fields?
Not within, I'm not sure, I see there's different projects, shared shelf has different projects,
Yeah.
but all of these are residing within the same project.
And I think you could probably also, one of the ways that one of the terminologies that they utilize is collections. And so there is a possibility to set up separate collections, but we haven't pursued that with them yet.
Is there a file size limit
Is there a file size limit?
Not that I'm aware of.
No.
for a single record or?
Not that we're aware of. A lot of their history has been with very high resolution imagery, so they're pretty used to that.
They may, and I'm not sure, maybe you could talk to this, they may limit the file type that you can upload, so you couldn't upload a 2 gig movie or something, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
Right now, we've been primarily concentrating on images, although we did talk about putting PDFs as far as, campus standards or architectural
Plans.
drawings or schematics or maybe even control code or,
Sure. Yep. Yes. Yeah, that's on that. Well, I don't know if that feature is available today, but that's part of the roadmap.
Just in case you didn't hear the question, it was, can we
Sorry.
upload video?
We'll figure it out within the hour.
I'm just gonna make that my job. I will become the
Moderator.
parrot.
Okay.
moderator. Okay, so we'll move on to the typical, how many people are familiar with Art Store?
Oh, good. Almost everybody.
Just log in. 'Cause a lot of people-
Jim, not to put you on the spot, but when your person uploaded the image, did they say how long it took, or didn't have it? Okay.
Well, this is, when you log in, I'm sorry, Jim, go ahead.
Sorry, I gave him some photos and they took about 10
They're
Okay, so
reasonable.
you trained them, right, Brad?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, we just provided the permissions, and Jim's group uploaded a few, because he was interested to see how hard it was. So, Art Store, typical interface. I don't have a lot of experience with it, other than helping the library on our campus use it. You probably are better experts at it, at using it than I am. We have a collection that they built for us under their demo page. And to me, the real power, for instance, when we go to conferences like this, or when I go to conferences like this, probably the most valuable portion of the conference is when we do the tour of the local campus or institution, and you get to go and see how everybody's solving the same problems that we face in their way. Well, wouldn't it be great if you could have all those institutions available to you, right from your desk? So that's kind of the power that I see in this. So if we were to do a search of Iowa, and you do have to pick the collection and go. Here's some of the space that Jim uploaded. And they are decent-sized images. You can see it's at 16%. I could show you the information that came with it. So in this particular record, there wasn't a lot of information uploaded to it, because any empty fields it will not show. I'll show you some where the fields are more complete. But it's a typical art store interface. I mean, if you want to zoom in on something, it takes a while to look at it, and you can move around. Let's see. So why don't we? Oops. Is there anything anybody wants to search for? We have about, what's it say, 54 records uploaded, just as a test.
Do you have to log in to be able to search?
Well,
When do you have to log in to be able to contribute? Just
so that's one of the things that we want to definitely get some feedback from everybody this morning. But so right now, for the proof of concept, that is the way that it is set up. I think our vision for it has been that this would be a free resource to education, that you would not have to be an art store subscriber, and you wouldn't necessarily have to have credentials to search the published sites. That it would be a free resource. But those are some of the kind of logistical governance type issues that we need to still work out. So,
Do we have a roving microphone available? Do we know? Because I would be happy to rove, because I hate to lose the questions on the capture.
Question. You're sort of flying around. Could you show some of those functions on the bottom bar there? What that you can
Sure.
yeah, we can
Dive in a
show the
little bit.
functions there. So.
I'm not terribly familiar with Art Store, other than my use with this project.
On the bottom, there's buttons.
You can show and hide the information. So this I button is the information. So here's all the data that comes with it, the contact information. You can see this is Dave McQuinn from Oswego, actually loaded quite a bit of information. Lighting type, acoustic quality, budgetary estimates, resolutions, video sources, video syncs, simultaneous content displays.
But let's go through the rest of those icons along.
Okay. That minimizes the window. I think with Art Store you can bring up two different records, and they'll go side by side. So I mean, Art Store is used to compare and contrast images typically in art. I'm sorry, I assume you had more experience in Art Store than.
Well, let's just go through the other ones.
Okay.
Cover the buttons.
I pretty much only use the information in full screen. You can zoom in, you can zoom out. I think this goes right to full screen.
Yep.
You can, oops, move around, drag around. You can actually take the box and move the box around, just like in a.
Like with LOD.
Exactly.
you want to see that in, do you want to see that in khaki?
Yeah.
No, that would be cool.
I don't know, what's this take you back? What's that do? Refreshes. It says print, save.
So it
Multiple view.
prints all, it prints the record for you?
I have no idea, I've never hit those buttons. Yes, anyone an expert in art store?
So-
Yep.
Certainly, we encourage you to do that. Did we publish that?
What's that?
We
we
gave,
said-
we gave the login
Yes.
information to the board. I don't think everyone in the room has it.
Is there anything anyone would like to see? I mean, you want me to?
So right now, as Brad has shown, it really the only path for viewing right now is publishing through an art store instance. One of the things that we've talked about with art stores, they are developing kind of that open, what do they call, open shelf or something like that, that would be a place where users could go. Again, you would not be required to be an art store subscriber to access the content. It could be published to a free
There's
site.
a question in the back row.
Is there any cost to this? If I wanted to start a repository, which
Is there a cost to this? How do I get started with
That
my
is a very good
repository?
question, and we're gonna
so
we're
glad
gonna
you
we're gonna
asked.
take that one up shortly.
There were a bunch of hands earlier. Yes, sir.
Is there any discussion regarding including the system's block diagrams in this information?
Yeah,
Photos of the room,
yeah, you
Yep.
you can upload other file types, and we talked about flow diagrams, PDFs.
Budget information. You know, there was some question early on whether we could protect certain parts of information, like some institutions might not want their budget numbers out there, so, or maybe they want to limit it in some fashion to
I think the
certain
answer to that
audiences.
is if you don't want to share that information, then
You don't put it up.
don't put it
Yeah,
up.
but-
So one of the questions that we have, well, is there anything else you wanted to?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. One of the big questions that we've talked with a lot of people about is why did we choose this platform? And really, there's two reasons. One is it kind of fell in our lap, to be perfectly honest with you. But the second reason is, we were really looking for a platform that was kind of sustainable and would survive any of us. When we began doing this originally, we had talked with a variety of the campuses within SUNY. Many of them have very talented developers and programmers on their staff. And could we try to steal part of their spare time in order to develop something like this? And a lot of times the answer was, well, I know Brad could do it, but I don't have the time. I can't release him to do that. Or I could release him to do it this semester, but I can't guarantee after that. So I think we felt it was important to have a partner whose core competency was this and could provide some survivability beyond any of the individual people that worked on its development. So some of the questions that we've got for you all this morning, and that I'm hoping will prompt some discussion for the rest of this morning's session, is we've developed this within SUNY as part of our Learning Environments Task Group, but as Lisa said, for it really to be valuable to anybody, it needs to be a more comprehensive resource. There needs to be a greater diversity of design samples and kinds of institutions and regions of the country and pedagogical approaches. And the way to get that kind of critical mass is through, I think, a national resource. So that kind of then begs the question, well, who should then be the custodian of the resource? Should it be a group like CCUMC or EDUCAUSE or somebody else, but probably it should not be SUNY. You know.
Or more than SUNY.
Yeah,
In addition to SUNY.
yeah, exactly.
It could be a number of models.
Right. It could be a model similar to, say, Merlot, things of that sort. How do we make it fiscally sustainable? Right now, we have a nice partnership with Art Store. They have been very committed to working with us on this. They have continued to express their commitment to continuing to work with us at no cost on further development and working out a lot of the logistics of how it works and refining the record model and things of that sort. But at some point in time, they are going to need to see a revenue stream for this. They are a nonprofit corporation, so they're not out to make a fortune on this, but they do need to have some kind of revenue stream that supports their real cost in making this available. There are a lot of issues that I think can't really be resolved until we have some kind of governance structure that surrounds this, which also then ties back to who's the custodian or custodians. For example, one of the things that one of the big questions we've got from a lot of people is, what constitutes an innovative design? Can anybody just put anything in this thing? Or would there be some kind of moderation model where a group of peers might review a submission and say, yeah, that one's not so innovative, that doesn't go in. That one's pretty cool. One of the things that Art Store has suggested is that in working with the Society of Architectural Historians, they have an interesting model where they allow their members to upload any number of kinds of records and images, and there is really no kind of peer review at that level. But then they have what they call the editor's choice list, where there is a peer review process, and the editors of their publications go through and go, wow, this one's really awesome. We should definitely highlight that and escalate that to a select list of samples. We've had some conversations this week and throughout the last couple of months where we've talked about that might be a great model for this repository as well. So it could be large-scale, really groundbreaking solutions and really cool, small-scale, innovative applications that solve, interesting problems. So it could be moderated in any or peer-reviewed in any number of ways. But in order to figure out what that's going to be, there needs to be some kind of governance structure to do that. Again, what we thought we need to answer some questions about who can contribute to this. Can it be anybody? Anybody meaning education or private sector individuals that have an interest in this, or should it only be EDU domain people that contribute to this? Again, we talked a little bit about moderation. Are we going to accept all contributions? Are we going to have kind of that select list that's peer reviewed? The other thing we talked about is people using kind of a Netflix or an Amazon kind of rating system. As people consume this resource, they go through and go, wow, that one's really cool, and you get 5 stars or 3 stars or whatever the case may be. Who should consume this resource? Should it only be higher ed? Could it be anyone in higher ed? What about architects, engineers, contractors, those kinds of folks? We've talked to a number of people that said, I don't have any problem sharing our design work, that all the great things that we've done on our campus with my colleagues in higher ed. I have a little bit of a problem sharing that with somebody else's architect. Because we have a pretty big investment in that, and I don't want architect B going in and gleaning all the great work of my campus and architect A for at no cost. So we've said, well, maybe there should be free access for higher education and perhaps subscription-based or paid access for non-higher ed users. So architects and engineers could pay to have access to the resource, which would also help generate a revenue stream that could offset the cost of administering this system over time. And then we certainly have a number of options about where this resource could be published. Obviously, as Brad demonstrated this morning, it's very, very easy to publish it to ArtStore, so it could be published there for the schools that are already using it. It could be published to a separate open shelf resource. It can be published to a number of other different places, or it could be published to all of those places. So, but again, a lot of these questions, in order for us to be able to kind of answer them with, in a way that makes sense for the ongoing development of a resource like this, there needs to be a governance structure in place to facilitate that conversation. So
I was under the impression from ArtStore early on that it could be published to Flickr. It could be
Yeah.
published to any,
any
open-
kind of
open
web-based resource. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where it started to get, because I was the person that would come back and ask questions like, can we use Facebook? I mean, everybody knows how to upload their family photos in Facebook. And something that simplistic, we were looking for a real easy-to-use user interface, that you didn't have to be particularly sophisticated in understanding ArtStore in order to use it. And that's what makes this difficult to envision, is shared shelf isn't out there and broadly adopted yet. So people
But-
aren't quite familiar with it, but they are
Right.
familiar with the ArtStore side of it.
Right. And we have, how many different institutions have contributed sample data?
Probably 8 or 10.
And we've trained none of them.
Right.
We've just sent them the credentials and said, here, go in and put in a record. And I don't think anybody's called us back and said, I can't figure this out.
The only
They
issue,
just did it.
The only technical issue with uploading and using ArtStore that we had is that you have to use Firefox, you can't use IE, and you have to have the right Java or plugins. So that was the only thing that, because I'm an IE user, and that's what, you log in and that's what it tells you right off the bat. Yes?
These are all good, big questions. I'm going to ask a more detailed one, because I just want to get this clear. The material, that each image, each object is a separate record in and of itself. But the truth of the matter is, when we want to know something about this classroom, that lecture hall, whatever, we want all of the information about it in one place. And the only way, a collection is, I doubt you're gonna make a collection for each upload, each room, so, and I know we ran into the same thing with NJVid, and we were linking videos with, learning objects, transcripts, written materials that, had to do with that video, educational guides, all that stuff. And there was a push there to get it together, and ultimately, don't do that, because you really want everything in one place.
Sure. Sure. I think our vision for the original design for this was that there would be, that you could pull up a record, you'd have all the data on that space, and that you'd have, right alongside of that, you would have perhaps multiple images, PDFs, Word docs, any other relevant, and it would all be essentially a single record. And that is not, that is not where the shared shelf product is yet. And yes, yeah. So that was one of the reasons why we thought, well, okay, it's not quite there yet, but neither are we. So, we'll work with them to see if we can to build that out in a way that makes sense.
We have a microphone available now, because we know that some of our colleagues weren't able to come here this morning, but we think it's important to capture the questions along with the responses, so.
I think it's fantastic. I'm already trying to use it in different ways, and I know on our campus we already have a website that has a lot of this information in it that's difficult to upkeep. So I'm wondering if we put everything in here, if we could pull it back out to reuse you know, we have a simpler version for our faculty so they can see what they're doing, and we probably, in our staff, use it most of all to remember exactly what, you know, blah, blah, blah building room looked like and what it's got in it currently and that kind of thing. So I'm just thinking down the road, we would want to be able to tag all those things and use them just for our campus.
I
We would
don't
wanna
know-
share,
I
but-
don't know that you would put all your campus information into shared shelf, and then it might go the other way. You keep your campus information up to date, and then you
Dump
export
it.
the select few to the innovative space repository.
Okay.
It's an interesting idea, though.
Yeah, and that, actually, you're the first person that has brought that up, and I'm thinking maybe there's an opportunity to maintain it in one place and publish it to multiple places, including your local resource on your campus that your folks are more comfortable with using, so sure.
I was going to say, I think that's actually a fantastic idea, just maybe as a side piece, or defining a schema that could be used more universally to define a classroom record. I mean, we all have those local databases. You know, some things in, like, you know, the EduPerson type thing, you know, and something like that, that as a byproduct, just having something which is interchangeable between institutions for classroom record keeping.
That's a really good idea. It's a really good idea.
And the definition of innovative as well, I mean, we all think of innovative as pretty or striking or having wow factor, but it's also innovative to come up with a solution that's highly cost effective that can be replicated in a uniform manner. So it doesn't always have to be the prettiest or have the greatest wow factor. Editorial board can help with that, perhaps.
Yeah, I think this is a fabulous start to a lot of different solutions that I think a lot of us are searching for. On our campus, we have a classroom committee, so everybody keeps their own database of classrooms, and this is kind of the installed technology and things like that. But as we try to move our environments forward into more collaborative environments, and we start looking at the flipped models and things like that, we're starting to join forces with our facility peoples and work more closely with them. So we want to do things like not only track the IT environment and what kind of AV we have in there, but also when it was renovated and maybe what the change in seat count was, and maybe potentially even what it looked like before, so that we can kind of track these renovations in a life cycle type manner and start moving towards the goals and the type of spaces we need to meet our institutional requirements. But then also I'm on a committee with the Big Ten institutions, the CIC, where we're looking at innovative learning environments and how do we share these resources across all these different institutions and look at just
Here you go.
innovation. Absolutely. So I see multiple different problems that this is a potential solution for, and wondered how we can help.
Well, that's a good question. Let me just comment. You mentioned collaborating with your facilities people, and we had for those of you who may not be familiar with SUNY, the State University of New York has kind of a separate corporation called the Construction Fund, and they are essentially the developers for all or most campus renewal projects. And so they have a whole host of architects and planners and things on there. And as Brad mentioned, they're working with 30-year-old standards, and they are eager to say, well, how can we inform the revision of our standards in a way that reflects the reality of the 21st century classroom. And they're all really smart people, but they're not instructional designers, they're not classroom media designers, they just don't have that expertise. And so this prompted a really good, I think, conversation and collaboration between the SUNY Fac Council and the Construction Fund. And as I think a lot of us brought it back to our our individual facilities people on our campuses, they were just as excited because they said, you know, we have all these meetings with you guys, but we don't often, to be perfectly honest, you really understand what you're asking for. And so if we had a resource where we could go and you could say, well, here's 7 examples.
Of an active learning classroom.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing we really want to try to build, and, you know, here's 7 places where they've already built it. And what we want to do is take, you know, 70% of this one and 10% of this one and a few other features from this one, and our facilities people were just like,
The president.
that would get us so much further along, so much faster.
The president of UNLV set up this conversation perfectly in his talk the other day, where, you know, had he built the classrooms that people were demanding, you know, 5 years ago, when everyone said we need 1,000-seat capacity rooms. I mean, we were having those conversations on our campus. It's difficult to envision how much seat space you lose in order to gain that flexibility. And then when you start looking at those models and scaling it, it's very powerful to see those images.
I just wanted to say that I also love this idea. Like, I'm already thinking of rooms I would want to put on here, and definitely glean ideas from other people, because, you know, coming to these, the best part is that we get to hear what everyone else is doing, and we don't get that the rest of the year. And also, like you were just saying, being able to go to someone that controls the money and be like, well, this school is doing it and this school is doing it. We need to be competitive if we're going to stay with these people. Like, that's very powerful.
That's a
tool.
good point. That's a good point.
So, I mean, I want this to work.
So the question came up earlier, you know, how can we help? There's I think, as we've talked with, particularly with CCUMC, I think we've come to the conclusion that the next step that we need to take in the life of this project is there needs to be some kind of governance body somewhere. You know, we need to get a broader group of colleagues of all different sorts from a variety of institutions to say, you know, how can we, you know, this is a good start, but it's far from perfect, and there's a lot of other perspectives that need to be included in this, and how can we you know, give this again some sustainability beyond just the 3 of us sitting here and our 1 or 2 partners at Art Store. How can we provide a custodianship for this as a long-term resource, and this might be a great organization to do that. EDUCAUSE might be also another opportunity, so they're good. I think we need to nail down a governance structure in order to answer all those questions and make some progress. I think we also need to have the answer to a lot of those questions will also give us a better idea of what the resource needs are going to be for this project in the long term. So we know at some point that Art Store is going to need some cash to continue to maintain it. And we have some basic ideas of what that price tag looks like, and it's not horrible. It's actually fairly reasonable. And but we also know that you know, if we're going to do things like, I don't know, validate EDU users or accommodate paid subscriptions from non-EDU users, that it's going to take some administrative staff time to do that. And you know, we don't think it's an FTE. We think it might be a quarter to a half an FTE. Where's that staff support going to come from? How's that bill going to get paid? We've talked about maybe pursuing a sponsorship model. So, you know, there's certainly plenty of companies in the world, many of which were here this week, and others like perhaps Steelcase is thinking a lot along these same kind of lines, and in a lot of the samples, there's Steelcase furniture featured there. So, you know, we might look to equipment manufacturers or furniture manufacturers or even some of the larger design firms nationally to acquire some sponsorship of the resource. You know, we wouldn't be asking them for a ton of money. So we've had some preliminary conversations with a few of them, and they've expressed very significant interest in doing that. And so I think we could generate a revenue stream that would support this in the long term. But again, it's got to live someplace. Somebody has to have official ownership and custodianship for it. I think having a solid governance structure would add credibility to any potential sponsors, and I think we could move forward. But I think having that governance structure in place is going to be the key to any of the next steps, whatever those might be.
Any other comments? Yeah.
I'm hearing you talk about having corporate sponsorship, and all immediately, like, I'm having some red flags come up in my mind, and I just wanted to know in the room, like, how people would feel about having that and what sort of limitations we would want to put on corporate sponsorship, because what I'm envisioning is they're uploading all of their ideas, and we're not getting to see as much of each other's
I'm not
ideas.
suggesting that they would get to actually contribute content.
Okay, good. That's what I just wanted to make sure
I'm
about.
thinking they just get their
It's
logo
a branding.
on the login screen.
Okay, good.
You know, no, or they might also, the other way that they might get benefit from it is, you know, we all buy from Panasonic and Daylight and so on, and, you know, 57 other vendors. They might, as they go out to call on customers and say, well, you know, University of Buffalo has done a really nice job with our XYZ units, and if you log on to the Innovative Instructional Space Repository, you can see some of what they've done. But I wouldn't think that they would be content contributors per se. But again, that's a governance issue.
Right.
Thinking with my CCUMC hat on for a moment, I mean, one of the incredibly unique features of CCUMC is the relationship between the vendors and the people that are building the classrooms. And there's this beautiful planning cycle that have, not a formal planning cycle, but we come, we talk to the vendors, and they take a lot of our ideas, and you know, you see those work into their development cycle. And it's an opportunity to have a conversation. I know of no other organization that has quite that type of relationship. So that's kind of why we wanted to come and talk here first to see if there was some synergy.
Yeah. That might be another way that vendors get benefit out of it, is they're simply, you know, if you're a sponsor, you can see the design samples and say, wow, look at all the schools that are developing this kind of space. Maybe we should build products that better suit that space.
Okay, last question.
I might also add, perhaps there's different levels that you could offer. You know, like if you just want to add some innovative spaces and be able to search the database, that's a free model. But then our institution, as we move forward and start looking at capturing more information about our spaces, perhaps, you know, we're looking at developing an entirely new database and what kind of, you know, costs are going to be associated with that with internal development. If there's a subscription-based fee for an institution like ours that wants to have an entire classroom database in there, perhaps there's a, you know, a sustainable model there that could help fund the overall project.
That could be a great addition, but again, it all boils down to governance. Yeah.
Not committing funds yet.
Yeah.
Susan.
I'm passing around a tablet because I'm hearing people express enthusiasm for this project, and the CCUMC board is in discussion about it. So we'd like your input. And so if you're interested in the project, if you're interested in participating with this project, please sign the piece of paper that's being passed around. Just put your name and institution.
I would add that comments in any fashion are beneficial to us right now. Constructive criticism, anything that will help us have a better discussion at the board level. Okay, that brings us to 10 o'clock, and join me in thanking our three presenters today. Thanks, and please continue to discuss this and ask some questions. Thank you.